leftovers, or the DMV,
number 97,
or house cleaning, or Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
It feels like making smart money decisions has only become more difficult in the current economic environment, right? It's hard to know how to respond in an era of inflation or federal rate hikes and just the stock market volatility that we're all experiencing. And that's why our show, How to Money, exists. We want to help you to make confident and informed decisions in these uncertain times.
We're two best buds covering practical topics like buying versus renting, saving money at the grocery store, maximizing your income potential, and ways to battle money anxiety. So if you're looking for help in navigating the world of financial uncertainty, check out our show. You can listen to How to Money on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to 100 Words or Less with Ray Harkins. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another podcast about independent music, punk, hardcore, metal, emo, whatever you want to call it, as long as it is conducted by people in small, sweaty rooms, or it is of the DIY variety, you know, all those things. You are obviously here to listen to a discussion with a person, and that person's name is Jake Collinson, who is the vocalist for an awesome hardcore band from Texas called Judiciary. And I love this band. I started this most recent LP that they put out on Closed Casket really brought me into the fold in ways that maybe their previous recorded output, I was like, you know, I think the band's cool, but this record definitely put it over the top for me. And I implore you to check it out. They don't tour much. You know, they play shows here and there. They're very strategic about what they do, but they just did a run of shows in Texas because obviously that is their backyard, and they're going to, you know, celebrate their record release by doing all that stuff. But Jake is an interesting dude, and I loved having this conversation with him. So we'll talk about that more in a moment. But you can always support the show by doing a few different things. First of all of these things are free, and they take you maybe 2 minutes of your time. First off, you can always reach out to the podcast, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. Love to hear from you, whether it's guest ideas, whether it's just general tomfoolery, whatever it is. My inbox is open from that perspective. Second thing, you can leave a rating and review on the Apple Podcast Store. I know you probably hear that week in and week out in all of your favorite podcasts, but there's a reason that we talk about that. And if you want me to bore you with it, I will. Just email me. But if you just want to give that rating and review on Apple Podcasts, that would be great. Or on Spotify, you can leave a rating, and that takes you, like I said, less than 2 minutes of your day. And I see you out there. There's just thousands of people listen to these podcasts on a weekly basis. And I'm like, hey, maybe if, 1% of you did that, that would be awesome. So I greatly appreciate that. Before we talk to Jake, I must tell you about pretty much my favorite coffee ever. And that is the awesome people over at Bodhi Leaf Coffee. I don't care if you're a total coffee snob nerd, or if you're like me who likes coffee but might not be able to tell the difference between an Ethiopian bean and a Colombian bean. This place is your one-stop shop. So first of all, you can get a 15% off discount off their roasted coffee subscriptions, 12 ounce or 5 pound, whatever your flavor, so to speak. Use this promo code 100WordsPod, 15% off their subscription. It's awesome because you can stop the subscription at any time, and it always ships free. And like I said, if you are a coffee head, you absolutely have to check out this company. They're based in Orange County, California. They also have a lot of really cool shops that are attached to their roasters. It's really, really cool. I love this coffee so much. I love them so much that they actually did a custom blend with me, the 100 Words Pod blend. It's so cool. And if I don't say so myself, it's probably some of the best tasting coffee I've ever had. Obviously, I'm a little biased about that opinion, but you can find all of that stuff that is in the link in the show notes of this particular episode. But like I said, use the promo code 100words-pod. They'll start shipping out beans to you. You can stop it at any time, but trust me, you're not going to want to stop it once the beans start hitting your doorstep. So Bodhi Leaf Coffee, thank you very much. And 100 Words Pod, 15% off. Do it up. Now let's talk to Jake. I want to say your band came into my consciousness. It was probably around like 2017, 2018, because you released your demo like 2016-ish or something like that, right?
Well, so we actually, the band started in 2013.
Right.
And we released our first demo in 2014.
Okay.
That lives like only exclusively on Bandcamp. But then we released the Axis of Equality, which is probably what you're referring to.
Yes.
In 2016.
Okay, got it. Right, yeah. Which I like that. Lives exclusively on Bandcamp. We don't need to spread that all over the place.
Yeah. Well, it's just like it was a good demo, but it was like it doesn't apply to the like it doesn't. The only thing that sounds like Judiciary today from that demo is me. The music has changed a lot since then. So
right, yeah, totally. And so and plus I clearly started to see your name on flyers as you started to get out there and play shows and stuff like that. And then the fun part is like once you start to see where a band kind of is getting out there, and then you look at where they're from. And then I'm just like, dude, Lubbock for real? Like, that's so weird. Because I mean, it's weird for a multitude of reasons, but I just remember I myself played a show in Lubbock. This was, 2013 or something like that. And I just remember it was such a, and I imagine you probably were either friends with somebody who put on the show or drove by it or whatever, but like it was in just a random hall, and it was the person putting it on, I want to say was a girl, but I can't remember exactly. But it was just one of those things where once you show up to the town, and I know you've experienced this, you're like, oh, so you guys obviously don't have shows a ton of the time, so people are excited about whatever comes through regardless of the music that it's attached to.
Yeah. Now I'm curious. You piqued my curiosity. What band were you with?
Yeah, so I played a band called Taken, but this band I played in was called Makoto. It was after Taken, and we were on tour with a band called Paulson. I do remember that because for whatever reason, we did a tour of Texas. I mean, when I say for whatever reason, not throwing shade against Texas, but we just did like 6 dates in Texas. It was really random, but
yeah. I mean, I might have been there, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, like Lubbock is super super small, and like especially during that time, it's like there's only a couple people in town doing shows. There's only a couple bands. So yeah, it's funny because a lot of people I talk to don't even know where Lubbock is. I've never heard of it, and I kind of have to like explain it in a way. So I'm glad you at least know where we're from.
Right, but I'm sure that experience of what I'm talking about, where it's like you go play a show somewhere that, I mean, clearly that it's not a big town or whatever, but it feels like that people just come out because it's like, oh, this is something to do on a Saturday, and I don't necessarily care about what the band sound like. This is just a cool place to hang out with my friends.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So there was a few years there where I was booking a bunch of shows in Lubbock, mainly because me and our bassist Kyle started booking shows just because like we started Judiciary and we wanted shows to play essentially.
Sure.
Then he kind of hopped off after a while, and then I started booking by myself. And when I started booking shows, I was putting like little like local indie bands on hardcore shows because there was people that would just go to those shows to A, hang out with their friends, and B, like drink, like what you're talking about. They just wanted a good time. And it got to a point where a bunch of them just started coming to shows just because they knew they could hang out and drink.
Right.
So yeah, you hit it right on the head.
And I really do. This was something I was going to pull out a little bit later, but I think it's appropriate to talk about now. The idea of like what you're talking about, putting on shows because you like literally wanted to play shows and you wanted to, you know, I mean, like I always love when you see bands that, you know, don't typically come through a specific city that just like hit it for whatever reason, whether it's like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I totally remember it's like Backtrack or Foundation, like bands of that level started to come through and you would see on the itinerary like Lubbock or whatever. And it was like, oh, there's effort being put in there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny you mentioned Backtrack because I was the one that booked that show
Perfect.
in Lubbock. Yeah, because me and Kyle, that was when me and Kyle were booking shows, and there was like, so when I was in high school, so this is probably like 2010 to 2013 was when I was in high school. There was the big metal promoter, and then there was these other two guys, Aaron and John, who booked like pop punk shows, metalcore shows, some hardcore bands here and there. So they their shows was what kind of pulled me towards hardcore and like more alternative music and everything like that. I would go to the big metal promoter shows and everything like that. Like they booked that Foundation show that you mentioned.
Okay.
And they were the ones that kind of put in the elbow grease to get like the more quote unquote like obscure stuff into Lubbock. That you probably saw flyers and were just like, how did they hear about that?
Right.
Essentially. Yeah. So,
and I love that because it's anybody that's ever toured or played in a band has that experience especially when you're on the, you know, DIY level where you're playing a mixture of some clubs and then some, you know, just random halls or whatever. But it's like, oh, I guess I'm going to Bloomington, Indiana, like where I don't even know what that is. And then you show up and you're like, dude, there's like 175 kids here. Like what's happening? It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. How the hell did this happen?
Right. But then honestly, those shows end up being the coolest because there isn't, you know, an overabundance of either shows or decisions that people need to make. It's just like, dude, of course I'm going to the show. Like, what else am I going to do? Go to the local Dairy Queen or whatever?
Yeah, exactly. And like a bunch of people, I think in those smaller cities, like if you get in with them early, they will be with you for life. I was talking to a guy I met this weekend that I saw them in Lubbock like years and years ago, like when I was in middle school, high school. And every time they go, like the Lubbock crowd will show out. And that's like proof in the pudding. Like if you go to those kind of cities, they will come and they will stay too. It's kind of crazy how it works.
Right. I mean, it is the literal definition of what bands strive for when they go out on tour, where it's like, oh yeah, there's 10 people the first time, there's maybe 30 people the next time. And it's like, you know, you can try that in, you know, large markets and large cities, but there's so many things to do. People are going to remember far less than what you're talking about, where it's like, oh yeah, this real formative experience, them playing my local VFW hall or whatever.
Oh yeah, and like I can name bands that like it meant a lot when they came to Lubbock to us. Like when I booked that Backtrack, it was a few different touring bands, including Backtrack headlining, and it meant a lot to me as like a kid who loves hardcore. Like bringing that kind of band to my city was unbelievable. And then like when I was even younger than that, like getting to see some of my first shows where like there would be an off date on Warped Tour and between Dallas and Albuquerque, and we're right in the middle of that. And so like people taking the time to stop there would be like, oh my God, I can't believe I get to see this band.
Right. You're like, thanks for showing up.
Which like people in the bigger cities would be like, oh, I saw that band like 10 times this year. They've been on tour all year. It's like, I saw them once and then I didn't see them again for another 5 years when I saw them in a bigger city. So
right. Well, we'll talk more about the small city mentality as we kind of go through your life. But you were correct me if I'm wrong. You weren't born in Lubbock, but your parents, your dad or somebody worked in the Air Force, which ultimately is what landed you in the Lubbock area.
So I was born in Lubbock.
Okay.
My dad is originally from Long Island, New York. and he joined the Air Force before I was born. Me and my older sister, she's 4 years older than me. And he landed. He was based in. Dad, if you're listening, if I butcher this, please forgive me. He shipped out. He did basic training here in San Antonio, and then he was based in Alaska, like near Fairbanks, and then he was based in Lubbock at the Reese Air Force Base. And he met my mom through a mutual friend that way. And then they got married, had me and my sister, and we kind of just stayed in Lubbock for most of my life until my adult life. So.
Got it. And you're the first on the scene. You were the older sibling, as it were.
No, I'm the younger sibling. My older sister is 4 years older than me.
Okay, got it. So she was doing the Lord's work and making sure that you were treated like the baby of the family.
In a way, she was more torturous, I think.
Oh, okay.
She'll fess up to that too. If she listens to this, like she knows she picked on me a bunch, but it built character. So
I always like that, how you could say that in retrospect, where you're just like, oh, anything tough that you've been through, it's like it builds character. And you're like, yeah, but it's terrible to go through.
Oh man, she, like, when I was like a toddler, apparently she would like tickle me till I threw up, and then like I there was like vivid stories about how like she would like scare me. There was one time we lived out in the country, like in like cotton field area. So we had this go-kart and we would drive it down dirt roads. And there was one time I hope she didn't do this on purpose, but she drove through like a sticker patch and got stickers all over me, like in the go-kart. And I just like drove home, like not being able to move and really in pain. So yeah, she tortured me when I was a kid.
I laugh, but that's, those are the character building experiences that you have.
Absolutely.
And so as you started to, grow up a little bit and have a little more autonomy as far as your identity and stuff like that was concerned, were you, into sports? Were you into school? Like what sort of kid did you find yourself being?
So when I was growing up, I kind of, I think I would call myself just like a general, like normal kid until I hit middle school. And then I think that's where like my taste started to kind of dive off into like, I think that's kind of when I became my own person, was in middle school. So like the beginning of middle school, and also like I speak of this like it was a long period of time, but it feels like that when you're in that time. So like 5th and 6th grade, I was super into like sports. I had like I would beg my mom to buy me like cool jerseys, and like I would collect like football cards, baseball cards, basketball cards, everything like that. I find that like throughout my life, I kind of jumped into obsessions and then just kind of pursued that and then moved on to the next one.
Right.
So I was obsessed with sports. And then I started hanging out with this. I started hanging out with this one kid, and before that, like I would listen to guitar music, like rock, classic rock, and stuff like that when I was driving around with my dad. He liked a lot of like I remember listening to like a bunch of Ozzy Osbourne, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and stuff of that nature when I was growing up. But then I started hanging out with this one kid. And his parents let him get like the explicit labeled albums that my parents would not let me get. I would have to go to Walmart and get the censored ones. But he showed me like bands like Deftones, Avenged Sevenfold. And when I started hanging out with him, I got really obsessed with like that genre of like rock, like Avenged Sevenfold and everything like that.
Right.
And that was actually when I went to my first show. I saw Avenged Sevenfold in Lubbock, and thought it was the coolest thing ever.
Oh, damn. Yeah, dude, if they're hitting Lubbock, like, so was this like a Wake of the Fallen era? What are we talking?
So this was I forget what I think it's a self-titled record, but it's the white one with the skull and the bat on it.
Yep.
That one had come out. I think I was like 12 or 13
right
at the time. And so like seeing them like and I like my dad let me like go up front and everything like that. Like I thought it blew my mind. I was like enamored with it.
Right.
And that was also around the same time I was really into skateboarding as well. Um, so I would get like skate videos, and I would try to listen to like what they were listening to or what they were playing during the skate videos. And some of them were like hip hop, and some of them were like thrash and stuff like that. But that was kind of just background music to what I was really obsessed to. But I think it planted seeds here or there.
Yeah, got the familiarity going on. And before you go on, I wanted to nerd out with the sports. Like, so you were buying jerseys, and like, so who were your people that you were like, oh man, I this is my path. I want to be like this sports star or this athlete.
Well, so around that time, I think that was when Carmelo Anthony first stepped into the NBA.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I was like super, super into his like play style. Also, like I thought that a bunch of like I never really had a loyalty to any team. Like I thought that the Spurs were cool, but like
they're pretty boring. Let's be honest. It's yeah.
No, at the time they weren't like the sexy team because they were like the well coached fundamentals team. Tim Duncan's one of the greatest players of all time. But
full stop. Agree. Yeah.
People don't like recognize that because he kind of had a quote unquote boring style of play.
Yep.
But like I loved like watching like Allen Iverson play basketball. That was when LeBron James first stopped in the league, and he obviously changed the game. Kobe, and then I was super interested in football. That was when the Patriots were super like starting to get into the dynasty that they became. I was a big fan of the Eagles at the time because like Donovan McNabb, Brian Westbrook era. I thought that they were super fun to watch. You were going all.
I like the multidiscipline sport because I do think honestly there is this grain of what you spoke about in regards to when you get into sports, you start to get into athletes. Like it's very similar trajectory as what people go through when they get into music and punk and hardcore. And you just start to peel out those layers, and like pretty soon you find yourself having all of these collections of different sports and be like, oh yeah, I'm super into, Gonzaga this year. You're just like, what when did this happen?
See, the only loyalty I have forever is to Texas Tech because they're from Lubbock. I went to college there. So like I've always had an affinity for like tech football, tech basketball, tech players going to pro sports. Like, but yeah, I kind of just liked the sport and what it brought, as opposed to like a certain team. I thought it was really cool to watch.
Right. Texas Tech, is that Texas Tech Raiders? Isn't that?
Yeah, Texas Tech Red Raiders.
Yeah, that just pulled that. Yeah, that was from the depths of the paying way too close attention to the March Madness brackets, being like, wait, I think it was that. That's great. Oh
man, yeah. When they made it to the finals, all mayhem broke out in Lubbock, Texas. There was cars getting set on fire. I'm serious.
I can imagine.
There was I was actually riding Lime scooters around like the bar area the night after they got to the Final Four, and I was told that they were by a Lime scooter employee. They were picking up the Lime scooters because the night before, when all the mayhem happened, they lost $40,000 worth of Lime scooters.
Oh my god!
Because all the students were throwing them into fountains. They made a pile and set it on fire. It was insane.
Wow, that's incredible that you were able to witness that and then get that that factoid. It's like, wow, that was a bad night for you guys. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in starting to experience, music and getting into that, Avenged Sevenfold is such a prime band for that time in your life. And especially, like you said, getting up front to see them in your hometown right in front of you. Were you kind of immediately smitten by the idea of trying to play in a band, or did that have to, kind of evolve as you grew older?
So that was where I want to say it was that moment, but I think even before that, I wanted to be in a band because I thought it was cool. I don't remember how old I was, but the first CD I ever bought was Newfound Glory's Catalyst because I saw it I used to watch like MTV when there was like music on it all the time, as opposed to just ridiculousness now.
Yep.
But I used to watch like MTV, and I loved that, and I thought it was cool. I used to like watch like Headbangers Ball, like, and I was also a big fan of wrestling at the time, and that was when they used to have like live bands play sometimes on like Raw or SmackDown. So I thought it was just cool, like the performance, this more aggressive style of music. And it wasn't like the ultimate goal when I was like a child, but the more I started getting into it, I think I warmed up to the idea.
Check it out. It's merch corner time with our friends at rockabilia.com. First and foremost, you need to go to their website and use this promo code, 100 words or less. Please use 100 words or less. That gets you 10% off of your entire order. And they have a Descendants skate deck up for pre-order right now. I love the Descendants. And plus, you can also buy Beatles, Rolling Stones, Bring Me the Horizon, Grateful Dead. I don't care what it is. You will be able to find something there for you, your family, and friends. Independently owned company out of the Midwest. They are, it's like 500,000 items, something like that. But they have so much stuff. And it's all officially licensed. So that means the bands get paid from this. Everybody wins in this scenario, including you when you use the promo code 100 words or less. What a professional transition right there. Anyways, rockabilia.com. Please use that promo code. It lets them know that you heard this ad and then marketing works. I love it. But mostly, I love Rockabilia and their continued support of this show. So again, rockabilia.com, 100 words or less, 10% off your entire order. Go buy that Descendant skate deck, please.
It feels like making smart money decisions has only become more difficult in the current economic environment. It's hard to know how to respond in an era of inflation, of Fed rate hikes, and stock market volatility. That's why our show, How to Money, exists. We want to help you make confident and informed decisions in an area that most folks find daunting.
It's no wonder most of us are flummoxed by finances. I don't know about you, but I didn't learn anything about budgeting or saving or investing in school. And I didn't learn a ton about those things at home either, but I do remember what a rhombus is, though, although that hasn't been terribly helpful in adult life. But our show is all about helping you to become more informed so that you can make smart and confident decisions with your money.
That's right. Yeah, we're two best buds covering practical topics like buying versus renting, saving money at the grocery store, maximizing your income potential, and ways to battle money anxiety. So if you're looking for help in navigating a world of financial uncertainty, check out our show. You can listen to How to Money on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
I mean, especially too when you are of an age where you watch something so visceral like that, but you maybe don't play an instrument or you don't, because I mean, I could say this as a fellow vocalist, like we're obviously talentless hacks and we just yell into a microphone, but yeah, like you don't know exactly how to do that. You're just like, I like this idea. I want to try to figure it out in some way, shape or form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And so did you, as you were going through, school and everything like that, and clearly you went to college, like, did you, I guess, apply yourself, Jake? Were you a good student, or was that something that you just kind of, kept the grades up to keep your parents off your back?
I was honestly a great kid.
Good.
Like, especially when I was in high school, like I looked like I was terrible. Like I would wear like Suicide Silence shirts, and like in my little small, I went to school in like a small town, north of Lubbock called New Deal. Like population is 700 there. And I graduated with 42 kids in my class.
That is very, if you don't like 3 kids, you don't like, 20% of your graduating class.
Yeah. And like, I went there from when I was in kindergarten till I graduated high school, with the same group of people. Like,
wow.
Me and probably 20 to 30 of those kids were in school together for 13 years. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's a long, and I mean, the advantage of that is that you really get to know each other deeply, but the disadvantage is the fact that your experience is pretty limited.
Yeah, exactly. And Austin, our drummer, went to that same school too. He was in the year below me, but yeah, we had the same experience. And yeah, I was a pretty good kid in school. Like I never really got in trouble. I was one person away when I graduated from being top 10 or 10% of my class, which was only like 5 people.
That's okay. That gets you close though. Yeah.
Yeah. I was a good kid in school.
was there a life path that was kind of unfolding for you in regards to, what you went to Texas Tech for and like what you were going to maybe enter as far as a profession?
Well, so when I was in high school, I was in like little local bands. Never really did anything. We went out of town a couple of times, but nothing like we never toured. We never had like recordings on any sort of platform. We couldn't. We were high schoolers that couldn't figure out how to like get our music on iTunes. We didn't even have physical copies of anything. So I was in bands, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go to college. I decided I was going to major in public relations, which I thought would be a good thing because my older sister was in marketing.
Okay.
And I thought that public relations fit me a little bit more because I was a decent writer, and public relations is a lot of writing. And I thought that it would be at least a semi broad major and could lead me into something that could relate to music, honestly. And just because like public relations is everywhere, you can go to any company, any entity, and they'll need you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of why I chose that.
Cool. That makes sense. I also know that generically speaking, especially when you're talking about the South, like religion plays a huge part in most family structures and stuff like that. Were you raised with any particular strain?
So I was baptized when I was a baby Catholic. We went to church when I was younger. It wasn't like, I guess, like the Southern Christianity type where you live and die by everything. But we did go to church, and we actually I slowed down going with my parents after my parents got divorced when I was 8. And I think that was just due to my mom's like mental, like her capabilities as like she was doing this alone now. Essentially, my dad was still around, but it was like he gets us on certain weekend or on like every other weekend, and like we kind of split our time. And it was a good divorce. Like I couldn't have asked for better parents to, have divorced parents.
Right.
But I think that we just kind of slowed down on going to church just because of time and mental spread everywhere else.
Right.
But then going to school in the small town I did, the church rules the town. And a bunch of my friends were very, very Christian. So I kind of started going to church with some of my friends if I would like spend the night at their houses and stuff like that. And there was some, it was talked about in the schools a bunch. So I took part.
Right.
And I no longer subscribe to that for a multitude of reasons. But yeah, that was kind of how it was growing up.
Sure. And I imagine, the reason I asked that too is because of the, censored CDs. I understand that, parents have sliding scales and clearly can have morality if religion isn't a part of it. But I also imagine that hanging out with, for lack of a better term, like the youth group kids, you were probably dabbling into the, the dark art of Christian metalcore and the Christian deathcore and all of this stuff that was happening around that time.
Brother, my first band was a Christian metalcore band.
Oh, how deep we talking here? What was the name?
Oh, I'm not going to put the name out there.
That's okay.
It's embarrassing. But
I let me put it this way. I highly doubt it based around the fact that, I probably know the band and, or like tried to sign them when I was working at a record label. But, but regardless, like, cause the reason I mentioned that, and not to embarrass you, but it's just like, there are these moments, especially when you're talking about in certain eras and pockets of time where it's like, it becomes inescapable, where it's like, if you got into, this style of music in the early 10s, it's like, yeah, of course you're going to have like a Sleeping Giant long sleeve hoodie, like, whatever. It's like, you're going to do that. So like, I get where you're coming from.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just, man, it just makes you, it's like first band syndrome. You'd be hard strapped to find any person who does music, who started a band in high school or middle school who could stomach going back and being like, yeah, that was good. Like at the very least, you could say like, oh, I had potential. I can see what we were trying to do. But yeah, we were not very good at what we were doing. But
yeah, you were trying. You were putting forth the best effort.
We were children. That's all you can say.
As one does, as you start to embarrass yourself, even though you're not embarrassing yourself because you have no self-consciousness or perspective. You're just because you're like, yeah, this is fun to play with friends in a band. It's great.
Yeah, exactly.
So as you started to, kind of play in bands and like you said, play out of town a little bit, were you immediately captivated by that lifestyle? Or was that something that you were just like, well, I like it, but I want to do more with it, if that makes sense?
I was, at that point, I was obsessed.
Right.
I wanted that to be the reality, but I had no idea how people did that. Like I would buy, so with whatever money I would get from like doing chores around the house and everything like that, my mom would kind of drop me off at the mall so she could go shop, and I would go to like FYE and Hot Topic. So at FYE they had little CD players like with all the CDs that you could just pop in and listen to it and see if you liked it and take it. And then Hot Topic had like a little kiosk you could do the same thing. So I would just go search for bands that way. Like every weekend I would just post up at FYE and Hot Topic and look for music. And through that I would buy like some of them had like deluxe editions with like little DVDs like from their tours. So like I remember there was a Parkway Drive album that I bought, and it had a deluxe edition that had a DVD from like their time touring. And I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. I mean, they're like in a van, like eating like shitty food and like jumping off of cliffs, and like they made it look really, really fun. And then they were also playing music and people were liking it. So like I was enamored, and I thought that would be the coolest thing. Now, like at the same time, I was like, okay, well, I still need to go to college, so I don't know how that can work.
Right. How do these two things work together? Right.
Yeah. But I was like, I want that somehow. We'll see.
I really love the fact that it is still so pervasive when you get that little sample behind the scenes of what it's like being on tour. Because, I mean, you don't have any conception. Like a band just shows up and you go to a show or a concert or whatever. It's like, it isn't until you see that where you're like, oh my gosh, like that's unbelievable. And like, it goes on. I mean, I myself am older than you, but I remember watching the Strife One Truth, like VHS. And it was it's same thing where you're just like, oh my gosh, like they're in Connecticut and they get pulled over by the police. It's just like, It's so cool.
Yeah, exactly. And like, that's the thing is like, they make those kind of DVDs and stuff like that, and those videos that would come out make tour look so much fun.
Right.
And like, you're just like, oh my God, they're just like boys hanging out. Obviously there's a lot more to it than that, but like it made me obsessed with the idea of like getting there. And like, obviously I loved music. I was obsessed with music in general. Like I was spending all my time trying to find new music. So.
Right. Yeah. It was like that. It became all consuming, which is awesome. And something I find, and we briefly spoke about it up top in regards to, like you were talking about the work that you were putting into developing a scene, like booking bands, doing it slightly from a selfish perspective because you wanted to play shows or whatever, but it's all, in good spirits. Talk to me about like that idea of just being like, hey, we want to try to, foster and plant seeds for the scene in order to, not make it huge because clearly like that's never going to happen, but be able to have a little bit of a community.
Yeah, I mean, it was A, to place the mission statement was A, to get Judiciary, have shows for Judiciary to play, but B, also like, I love this music so much and I want to share it and have like, I want to have that like 16-year-old that saw like that that sees their first hardcore set as opposed to like a metalcore set or a deathcore set or anything like that. I want them to feel what I felt in that moment. So I want to try to get all these like kids into it. like when I was booking shows, I was, if I saw a high school kid there, I'd go right up to him and be like, hey man, like I would try to like, you know, because I talk like I was like 30 years old talking on, like, I'm like, hey, let's be friends. I was like 19 booking shows.
Right.
So like I could talk to these people and it wasn't weird.
Right.
I would just be like, hey man, like you go to Coronado or Monterey, like let me get your Facebook, like let's like bring your friends out next time, like isn't this cool? So I was like trying really hard to like build a community there, because I thought it was the coolest shit ever. I mean, I was obsessed with it. I would watch YouTube videos at home all the time of live sets, and I wanted to be like, I want Lubbock to have one of those kind of thing.
Right. I do like that, the inclusiveness, that especially like what you're talking about, where you want to shoulder some responsibility and sort of pay it forward in regards to, I had this experience. I would love to try to build a space to have other people have a similar experience, but then also like even go the additional step of interacting with people. Cause it's a whole, different ballgame where you could be like, all right, like I'm going to talk to this, 15-year-old who might just look at me like I'm some weirdo with 3 heads because I'm, trying to like communicate with them at a show or whatever. But it's cool that you were like really being deliberate about it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's how a bunch of scenes grow, honestly. Like I would like, that's why I worked the door at every show. Cause I was just like, I want to be like the first person that these people see. So I can maybe make an effort to bring them back here.
Right.
Yeah, I think that like between like cause it's a mixture of both the music, B, the experience. And I wanted that at least my part of the experience, the person that was putting it on, to be the best one possible. And then I knew that the rest would take care of itself, because I know that hardcore is like so enamoring and so like easy to get hooked by.
Right. That's true. I love that idea where you're like, it's like the Kevin Costner Field of Dreams scenario where it's like, if you build it, they will come.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right. It's like, I know that you watching, Backtrack or any of these bands is going to immediately put you in a space where it's like, oh my gosh, like this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. So that's so cool.
Oh man. I mean, when we booked that Backtrack show, it was what year was it? 2014. It was Backtrack, Expire, Zabalba, and Downpresser.
Oh, huge.
Yeah, like the biggest purely hardcore tour that happened in Lubbock, and we got like, I think we got like 200 people paid, which like for that tour anywhere else in Texas, in Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, Houston, that promoter's losing a ton of money.
Right.
But like for us, it was like the biggest hardcore crowd we've ever had. And obviously like there was people driving up, our friends from like Midland and Amarillo drove down, and then some people from New Mexico drove for it. But like I knew that there was some people that were there that like may have saw the other bands on like a metalcore tour, and they were like, oh, I saw this band last time, let's go to the Oyster Bar and go check them out.
Right.
And I knew that the second that Zabalba played, the deathcore kids would get it. Like, yes. Oh, they're playing a breakdown. Oh my God. And then like the second Backtrack gets up there, if there's a punk kid in the crowd, they're like, oh wow, this sounds like this. I can get behind this.
Our friends at evilgreed.net want you to know they are one of the best web store solution providers around for bands and record labels. But you as the consumer, you win, because they give you the best stuff that you can buy, whether it's vinyl, shirts, whatever it is. But they have a very highly, highly curated view of the web stores that they open with bands and labels. But let's full stop for a moment. You need to use this promo code, 100 words. That gives you 10% off your entire order. And let me just run through a small list of some of the bands that they work with, whether it's Full of Hell, Power Trip, Emma Ruth Rundle, The Body, Death Heaven, Gate Creeper. You get the vibe, right? And then on top of it, they work with really, really cool record labels like Triple B, Sargent House Records. It is awesome. If you like anything that is remotely artistic and or heavy, they have your stuff in spades. I saw that they just have a new 7-inch pre-order for Fucked Up. Gosh, I love fucked up. But anyways, evilgreed.net, use the promo code 100 words and you will find something there. And I know you might trip across the site and be like, oh man, they're based in Germany. I don't know. Like, will that get to me in the United States? Yes, it will. And it'll get to you very cost effectively and very quickly. I've ordered from them before and it's a win-win scenario. And you win as the consumer when you use the promo code 100 words. Thank you very much, evilgreed.net. And go check out their site. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Trust me in saying that therapy is an incredible tool for as you are traveling through life, because who you are as a person, 5 or 10 years ago is maybe a completely different version of yourself, because we run into challenges, whether it's work, whether it's life stuff, relationships, all of those things you can work through with a therapist. And that is why I love BetterHelp and what they do. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and it's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire and then you get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Ray to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp.com/Ray. Dip in, give therapy a try, and become a better person.
And so when you started to, like when Judiciary started to, form and you were playing shows locally and everything like that, I know that it was interesting because just from an outsider's observation, the Texas scene is very supportive overall. Like the entire state kind of, props each other up, whether it's like, oh, Iron Age, like it doesn't necessarily matter where you're from. But at the same time, there is that element of, oh, we're from a smaller town, so we might not get as much, visibility or love if we're, coming from a place that isn't San Antonio or Dallas and stuff like that. Did you feel kind of that like small town, not like people were shutting you out or anything like that, but did you have that feeling of like, hey guys, we're over here in Lubbock, which maybe isn't as, well known as the other places where people are paying attention to hardcore?
Oh, we definitely struggled at first. Because like, I think that people don't have a context for, like, they know Texas is big. I feel people can't grasp how big it actually is. To put it in perspective, Lubbock is a 6-hour drive from Dallas, a 6.5-hour drive from Austin and San Antonio, and a 9-hour drive from Houston. So we are so far from any major scene, any major city. The closest cities are Dallas, which is 6 hours, Albuquerque, which is 6 hours. They don't have a big hardcore scene. Denver's 9, Oklahoma City's 6. So it's like, we're on an island out here, and that's essentially like saying, like, oh, you're from North Carolina, oh, you're a local to Washington D.C. or you're a local to Long Island or something like that. You know what I mean? Because like in distance, that's kind of how relative it is.
Right.
But since we're from the same state, people group us together a lot of the time. So at first, there was kind of a barrier to entry. The only scene that embraced us pretty quickly was San Antonio. We drove up to Amarillo for a show because these two bands, Hardside and Afflictive Nature, were playing. And we loved Afflictive Nature. We loved Hardside. And we talked to Zane, who's the vocalist from Hardside, and Pat, who's the vocalist for Afflictive Nature, both good friends of mine now. And we were like, hey, we're in Judiciary. And they were like, oh my God, you guys should come down to San Antonio sometime. And they booked us a show. Like, they booked us 2 shows, actually. And they were the first scene to welcome us with open arms. Dallas took us years to break through. And that was because it's all water under the bridge now. But at first, like, they didn't want us there. They thought that, I don't know if they thought that maybe we were just some, like, dorks from West Texas that didn't belong, or they were just trying to, like, protect what's theirs. Either way, it took us years to, and the only time we got to play Dallas the first time was because a band on tour specifically asked for us to be on the show. And then Houston, since it's so far away, like, that took a long time too. And we got invited to a fest called Fallcore that was put on by this guy Willow and Daniel from Die Young. We drove 9 hours there and drove 9 hours back because I had class the next day.
Right.
So like it was hard for us at first, but eventually we got accepted into the Texas scene. But there's been a lot of work that had to be done.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I the description of what you're talking about, it crystallizes it. It makes a lot more sense that it's the same way that bands have to travel and play outside their state. But obviously the downside of Texas is the fact that it's a huge state and you have to drive so far to get anywhere. So yeah, I get that. I'm also guessing, like, just based on your general location and locale, a band like Ivy League was probably, also kind of doing the Lord's work out there, getting the name of a smaller town out there.
Ivy League was one of the biggest reasons why hardcore hooked me.
Amazing.
They're I would consider them part of my Texas hardcore Mount Rushmore.
I love it. What lay it to me. What's your Mount Rushmore then?
The classic, the big three: Iron Age, Power Trip, Bitter End, and then
Perfect.
My West Texas self has to say Ivy League.
I love it. I like it. Okay, good.
Which like that's probably not on a lot of people's Texas Mount Rushmore, but it's. I feel like I have to, because like the Midland scene and those guys that were doing shows down there, they hooked me, man. Ivy League also had this other hardcore band named Mongrel that they started, I think, as a joke, that they would just like bring up their merch guy to do vocals and they would just play hardcore songs. But their music, between Ivy League, Mongrel, there was another band called Calloused that was there at the time. They hooked me, and I would go to those Pine Box shows, and like they would bring good tours, and Ivy League would kind of make their name known because they were touring all around there, like you said. So, those Ivy League means a lot to me.
That's really cool. I love to hear that, because I do think it's like, once a band, it's not even like breaking out as far as making this huge national presence of themselves, but once they start to, align themselves to the record label and tour a little bit, on the West Coast or East Coast, it's just like, and then, they may fade into the ether as far as like the overarching, punk hardcore ecosystem is concerned. But it's like, to your point, it's so huge.
Yeah. Well, and to put it in context for the listener, they're from Midland. That's still 2 hours away from me in Lubbock. And I was driving down there like just to go to their shows. So like, yeah, being in West Texas, it takes a lot of work to keep your interest here.
Totally. And, I know that you have done as much touring as you possibly have been able to with Judiciary. And I mean, obviously putting out a decent amount of music and, doing your thing. But it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, you've been very deliberate about kind of the approach of what you're taking, because, there's obviously jobs and other extenuating circumstances that prevent you guys from being, the proverbial 10 months out of the year on the road. Was that kind of like either a conscious choice or something that you could basically kind of evolved into because of all of the things that, life throws at you?
So I think that it's kind of a mix of both.
Okay.
I think that before pre-pandemic, we were kind of getting into the cycle of being not at 10 months out of the year, but like at the 2019, we were out for 4 months that year. Which was a lot for us. That might not be a lot for some bands, but like in this era, like that's a ton to be gone. So we were starting to get there, and then the world melted down. So we kind of had to everybody's life's changed with the pandemic, but now we're kind of in we have to be a little bit more I guess careful with what we say yes to, and we want to make it worth our time and everybody else's time. Honestly, we want to make it special when we play now, and I think that that's where the conscious choice comes in, where it's like, we see the value in being a little bit more selective. Now, that's not to say like if we, there could be something that's brought to us that takes us out for 6 weeks for a tour, and we're gung ho for it. But yeah, we have I think between our choices and the world's choices, we've kind of decided that's the best course of action for us.
Yeah. And honestly, I find it so interesting where bands can exist in this juncture of what you're talking about, where it's like, I like to joke around and say it's like full-time, part-time, where it's like clearly the passion for not only creating music with your friends, but, putting art out in the world, all that stuff still exists, but bands, to your point, can make these more deliberate choices, whether it's just like playing fests if you're getting the invite to, and like you said, make those really special and more of an event, as opposed to, bands that just felt like they had to run their, faces into the ground by touring 10 months out of the year. Then all of a sudden be like, I don't even enjoy 9 months of this, let alone 1 month. Like, this is not sustainable.
Yeah. Well, and when we were touring like semi-heavy, like I enjoyed it. It's definitely hard, especially with the outside circumstances that exist, like how much things cost, the when you start getting on bigger tours, Live Nation comes in and takes your money, and it gets a little bit harder from there. And then like you mix in like touring hard comes with its own expenses, like, oh, you got to pay for this more expensive gas, you got to hey, your van blew its fuel pump, you got to repair that. And then you come back and you've come back from tour and you're like, okay, I have enough money to take care of my things. What now? Because now I need to eat.
Right.
So like, it's a very chaotic lifestyle, but we've kind of adopted like the mantra of like tour smart, not hard. Which hard tours, I admire them. And I think that there's value in that too. It shows you, it, like we said earlier, builds character. And I think that gave us a perspective of like what it takes to be able to be selective in that.
Right. Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. It does, especially within hardcore, there is that ability where bands can still be present in people's lives in ways that you obviously couldn't be, some 10 to 15 years ago, where it's like and granted, the attention span is much smaller, so you need to constantly drip people out. Mm-hmm. But yeah, to your point of just being able to remind people that like, hey, we're still here. Hey, we're releasing music. Hey, we're going to play these shows. And like, hopefully the people that care about us will follow along, and maybe we'll continue to grow from that perspective.
Yeah, and like if any of this sounds like we're never going to tour again, that's just not the case. Like, we're going to be places and nothing's off the table, but we're just trying to be more deliberate about it, and we want to keep growing this to make it a more special thing for everybody involved.
Absolutely, totally. The two last things I wanted to hit on was because you exist in this, you're focused on the band, but then you're obviously doing a lot of stuff in your, real life, so to speak. What's the path there? What's keeping you occupied outside the band?
So I actually work a sales job.
Oh, nice.
I found out I shifted to sales because before the pandemic, my life was tour, come home, do like 1099 jobs and freelance contractor stuff. I still do like some freelance graphic design on the side, but pre-pandemic I was kind of depending on that income. And I also did like Uber driving and stuff like that to kind of pay my bills and be good and everything like that. Now, when I during the pandemic, I moved to San Antonio, and I obviously, was in a place where I could take a job where I kind of had to be stationary. So I picked up a sales job that I found out I'm pretty decent at. And I some of my college experience worked in there too.
Nice.
And, yeah, kind of looking to carry that forward.
Sure. Well, I mean, especially too, where it's so many people can exist in I think one of my favorite moments ever with existing in this, interview podcast space was, Scott Vogel telling me like he was a telemarketer selling insurance. Like, it's just that idea of the developing disciplines that you don't really make the connection that like one helps the other, but it's like, dude, I mean, if Scott Vogel called you up, like you'd buy anything from him. Like,
like that. It's funny you say that. Like, we did some shows in Europe with Terror.
Right.
if Scott Vogel did my job, he would be top of the company.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and I love it because there is that element of people, especially that exist within the punk and hardcore scene. They kind of, push their nose up at like, oh, you're a suit, you're joining the 9 to 5. And it's like, there is an element of that. Like, if you're completely selling yourself out where it's like, oh yeah, man, I'm, working in a gun manufacturing plant or whatever. It's like, that's one thing. But if you're just like doing something that isn't causing harm to people, and like, you're also like you said, finding out that you're good at something, like, why not try it? Like,
well, and I think that's the thing that a lot of people have to realize is like, we are in a genre and a world that like is very hard on touring musicians to not have a main thing, or at least something that supplements their income. I sympathize with a lot of people who grind out there and like go broke, like trying to make it happen, because it's hard.
yeah.
So like that's the main reason I kind of got into it, especially like with the possibility of like, oh, we might get an offer and I might have to go back on tour. I need to find something solid because I don't want to go back to doing Uber driving. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like that's what I did. I found something solid that can keep me secure, and I can have my band stuff too, and try to grow that and do that. And there's people in bands that are a lot bigger than mine that do the same thing. Like they're working remote jobs or jobs that they can kind of step away from for a little while because they have to. That's just the reality of what we're doing now.
And honestly, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think also it really, the dedication that you put into the band and your work in regards to whatever artistic endeavor you're pursuing, when you do have, the normal trappings of quote unquote real life, that means that whatever you're experiencing with your band, honestly, is probably that much sweeter, because it's not this, it's less common for you to do that thing, like put out a record and do all that, rather than stepping on the cycle of like, okay, it's been 18 months, we got to get a new record out there and stuff. It's just like, we'll get to it. I promise. Like, we still care about the band and we're still going to exist.
Yeah. Well, and I think that it's also just, like I said, it's just the reality of the situation that people kind of are forced to be in this double life kind of scenario.
Yeah.
Because that's how you survive. That's how you make sure you have a roof over your head when you get home, and you have food to eat while you're out. So, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Totally. Well, Jake, very much appreciate you coming on here and letting me punish you about all these random things. But love the band, love what you're doing, and keep being a full-time, part-time band, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciated talking to you.
There we go. That was a great conversation with Jake. Big shout out to his publicist, Tim, for always bringing me really interesting and cool people to discuss stuff with. It was funny because Jake, I was like, oh yeah, like that would be a good conversation. And then, doing some Instagram research on him, and I was like, oh damn, he already follows me. Like, I'm an idiot. And I obviously just missed that request. But anyways, love what Jake has going on with Judiciary. And like I said, check out their new LP that came out on Closed Casket just recently. Great band. Check out all their recorded output. But next week, I have a great conversation. Speaking of some of my favorite PR people, James Goodson. He plays in a band called Daisy, D-A-Z-Y. I've worked with him for many, many years on the PR side of things. He does really, really good work, super professional, super on top of it. And he's been playing in a lot of bands for a long time, but Daisy has been popping off recently. I mean, heck, they're on tour with Snail Mail for pretty much all of April, if I'm not mistaken. But James is a great dude. I got to meet him actually for the first time in real life in the United Kingdom last summer. He was over there with Military Gun and helping them out, playing some shows. And I was like, James, this would be fun for you to come on. He's like, actually, that would be fun. So we did it. James Goodson from Daisy is on the show next week. Until then, please be safe, everybody.
Leftovers. Or
the DMV.
Number 97.
Or house cleaning. Or
Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
When you hire your local CertaPro painters, you get
the power of a cut above.
Decades of expertise to transform your home. From so-so to virtuoso.
The power of neighborhood painters.
We live where you live and probably like the same pizza place you do. Put
the power of pro
to work for you today. Get your project started at CertaPro.com.
Each CertaPro painter's business is independently owned and operated.
What's up, everybody? This is Johnny of the Johnny Drinks Podcast. We are proud to announce our official partnership with iHeartMedia. We're going to be sharing practical life advice and tips on how to become a better version of yourself. Don't worry, we'll be talking all about cocktails too. Guests will be ranging from high-profile business owners and entrepreneurs to family and loved ones. We're excited, and I hope you are too. Like my dad always says,
fill your life with health, wealth, and happiness.
Listen to the Johnny Drinks Podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.